All right, good morning, everybody. I'm going to spend a few minutes today reviewing the demographic transition model, some of the things that relate to that, including epidemiological transition, if I could talk. And then I'm also going to go over a little bit with population pyramids and how those all relate here. Before we start, though, I want to talk about a couple things real quick. Just one slight change from yesterday's video. I mentioned yesterday that I would have a Google Meet on Monday at 9 o'clock. Of course, as soon as I said that, our department scheduled a department meeting at 9 o'clock on Monday. So I'm going to push our Google Meet back to 10. So if you have any questions at all, this is obviously not something you have to do. If you have any questions about the AP test, anything in general, AP tests, end of the year stuff, jump on there. I'll be there from 10 to 11. That'll be for both geography and for economics. So I'll do them together. So if you're in either of those classes or both of those classes, you can jump on there at that time. Okay, first thing I need everybody to do today is to go out to the writing prompt form, and I'm going to need you to put your name out there, and I'm going to need you to put two things into the writing prompt form. The first thing I need from you is the book number that you have at home right now. I went into the school today just to do an inventory of books to make sure that we have everything for the end of the year, that I get things turned in. I have a lot of missing books that were never assigned to students, but then I also have a lot of your books that are there. So there's a decent chance that some of you grabbed the wrong book before you left, if you grabbed a book at all. So please, in the writing prompt form today, please tell me your book number. For those of you who are in both econ and geo, please give me your econ book number too. I forgot to mention this in when I shot the econ video. So if you have your econ book number, please give me that as well. So geo book number, econ book number, if you're in both classes, please make sure I have that today in the writing prompt form. The other thing I want you to put in the writing prompt form is to give me a little bit of feedback on which units of the AP test you think you need the most review on. So I'm going to kind of go over those very briefly here real quick. Unit 1 is called Think Geographically. And again, you can get these out on that site I showed you yesterday that has the link to that big 160-page document. Unit 1 is Thinking Geographically. So that was the different types of maps, map projections, anything having to do with patterns, types of data analysis, so global versus national versus local, and then all of our regions, so formal, functional, vernacular, all of that stuff. That's all Unit 1. Unit 2 is anything having to do with population, so population density and how that affects society, things about population growth and decline. We talked earlier this year about Thomas Malthus and his ideas there. Immigration policies and their effects, anything having to do with migration, push-pull factors, anything like that. All of that falls under Unit 2. Unit 3 was culture, so we'll looks at the ways that different cultural practices spread. So that kind of, again, goes back to a little bit related to migration. It goes back to some historical forces, so things related to trade, colonialism between countries. It looks at globalization and the impact of globalization on the world, and it looked at religion. So we talked about our ethnic versus universalizing religions and the impact that those had on the world. So that's Unit 3. Unit 4 is political, so that would have been the types of political entities, so nation states versus nations versus ethnicities, things like that. Shapes of states, so the different shapes of countries, why they look the way they look, things like that. Forms of government, so we talked about unitary states, federal states, things like that. And things that lead states to break apart. So we talked about push and pull factors. We also talked about things that unify people, so nationalism and things like that. That's all under Unit 4. And then Unit 5 was agriculture. So farming practices, origins and spread of agriculture, green revolution, farming, anything having to do with farming and the environment and society. So those are Unit 5. So those are the 5 units that we're going to cover in detail on the AP test. Now, again, a couple of the models fall into the agriculture chapter. They're not specifically going to ask you about the models from Units 6 and 7. So when we looked at the different models of how cities are laid out, things like that, they're not specifically going to ask you about those. But if you kind of link those in to other things that they do ask you about, I think that that's going to be a good thing. That's going to be something that's going to benefit you on the test, to be able to link to content that they're not specifically requiring of you, because that's going to show them that you did learn all the material for the year. Okay, all right, let's look at demographic transition real quick. I'm going to draw this in 3 colors, hopefully to make this easier to see. And I'm going to start with our birth rates. So in stage 1, now remember, there are no stage 1 countries left on Earth, okay? Stage 1, our birth rates are really, really high, okay? So high birth rates. Stage 2 countries, which is a lot of our African countries today, we still have high birth rates. Okay, so all the way pretty much to the end of stage 2, you end up with really, really high birth rates. Now, in stage 3 countries, we start to introduce things like family planning, medicine that allows people to live longer, therefore not making it so that people have to have as many kids as they have had before. And we start to see that our birth rates begin to fall. So stage 3 starts to see the fall of birth rates. Hey, they're going to continue to fall, okay, through stage 4 and kind of start to level out towards the end of stage 4. And then we're going to see them kind of stay fairly level when we get to stage 5. So birth rates tend to fall. So we go from African countries, stage 2 countries today, where we're having like 6 kids per family, to countries in the West where we're having 2 or so, just over 2, just under 2, depending upon the country, kids per family. So we start to see these birth rates fall. Now, birth rates are never going to fall to 0. You're never going to see that approach the x-axis down there. It'll kind of level out towards the end of stage 4 and kind of stay, maybe rise a little bit, but not really, just kind of stay put as we move through 4 and 5. Now, let's look at our death rates. Okay, so stage 1, okay, death rates are basically the same as they are with birth rates. Okay, so a lot of people are being born, a lot of people are dying, everything's just kind of staying the same there. Now in stage 2, if we look at our African countries today, at the beginning of stage 2, we still see really high death rates, and then we start to see death rates begin to fall. And death rates fall, and they're starting to fall because these countries are introducing modern medicine. They're starting to have things that are what we would expect to see in the United States, but not to that extent. We're going to have the introduction of some vaccines, family planning, things like that. We're going to see improvements to cleanliness of water. People aren't dying from starvation as much. We're going to have different sorts of advancements there. Now, stage 3, death rates are going to continue to kind of fall. Okay, and stage 4, they're going to continue to fall up until we get to, okay, right towards the end here. Okay, now, what we're going to see as we move towards, actually, I screwed this up. Let me go back here. I'm an idiot. Okay, let me go back to my eraser. If I can figure out how to do this. Yes, subject eraser. Okay. Let me take this death rate down here. I did this a little bit wrong. Okay, so our death rate is going to stay below our birth rate. Okay, oops, I didn't mean to erase my line. Let me put stage 3 back. All right, there we are. Okay, so death rates are going to stay below our birth rates, below our birth rates, until we get to the end of stage 4. Okay, and then at the end of stage 4, our death rates and birth rates kind of meet each other. So what you see here, and you see a couple kind of points here that are significant. Okay, one significant point is at the end of stage 4. Okay, at the end of stage 4, our birth rates and our death rates come together. And that's a significant kind of factor that tells you when you go from stage 4 into stage 5. And you also see a significant point here kind of at the top of between stage 2 and stage 3. When you start to see a decline in birth rates, that's going to show that a country is shifting from stage 2 to stage 3. So those are kind of the 2 inflection points that you really need to pay attention to. Okay, then we go into stage 5, and death rates slightly start to come above birth rates. So what we see here is negative population growth. Okay, once we get to stage 5. Now, let's look at this last thing that you need to look at, which is the natural increase rate. So NIR, natural increase rate. What we see in stage 1, because birth rates and death rates are basically the same, our natural increase rate is basically 0. Okay, so no natural increase. Okay, birth and death are essentially the same. Okay, now in stage 2, you can see birth rates stay really high, death rates start to fall, so our natural increase rate begins to skyrocket. So it's going to reach its peak there at the end of stage 2. Okay, so kind of like we saw there, you're going to have kind of an inflection point at the top of your natural increase rate, okay? And then what you're going to see as our birth and death rates get closer and closer together as we move through 3 and 4 is that this curve's going to fall until it basically hits the x-axis at the end of stage 4. So at the end of stage 4, when your birth and death rates are the same, your natural increase rate comes back to the x-axis. Now, in stage 5, what we see when the death rate is higher than the birth rate, the natural increase rate is going to be negative. So that curve's going to drop below that axis when you get to stage 5. Okay. Now, let's just do another couple quick refreshers here on what each of these stages looks like. Okay, so stage 1 countries are classified, and again, there are none of these left anymore. Okay, these are what we call low growth countries. Okay, low growth. Okay, high birth, high death, basically no natural increase. Okay, stage 2 countries are African countries. These are our high growth countries. Okay, birth rates stay high, death rates fall, high growth. Okay, stage 3, we're still seeing growth. Okay, it's not as high as it is in stage 2 countries, so we're going to call this kind of moderate growth. These are moderate growth countries. Their population's still growing. Okay, birth rates still higher than death rates, but it's not nearly as high as it was in stage 2. Stage 4, notice that birth rates are still above death rates right until the very end, but they're getting very, very close to each other. This is a low growth stage. And then we get to stage 5, which is negative growth or declining population that we would see when we get to stage 5. So that's kind of the view when we look at these countries. Now, 1 and 4, okay, both low growth, they look different. Okay, stage 1 countries, which obviously don't exist anymore, really, really high birth and death rates. Stage 4 countries, declining birth and death rates, but they're kind of coming together. That gap between them is shrinking as you get closer. Okay, now let's look at epidemiological transition real quick, because this is obviously super relevant with where we're at right now. Okay, what is killing people in stage 1 countries? This would be things like the plague. Okay, obviously, we don't have stage 1 countries anymore. We don't have plagues really anymore. Obviously, coronavirus is very, very significant. But what you can see here is that we do have some ways in which we can control it. Through societal control, through attempts to, obviously we have very sophisticated medical care today that we didn't have before. So while this disease is going to kill tens of thousands of people, it's not going to kill tens of millions of people like we saw in stage 1 countries when we had the plague and things like that. Hey, now in stage 2, some of the things that we're seeing with coronavirus today are the types of things you would see in stage 2 countries. These are pandemics. So stage 1 countries, these are things like famines, really high death diseases. Now, in stage 2 countries, we see pandemics. Okay, this is exactly what we're seeing, okay, today with the coronavirus, is what we generally see in stage 2 countries. Now, the difference is, okay, and what we're seeing here, what links pandemics also to stage 5, which we'll talk about here in a second, is generally, when you look historically, stage 2 countries have pandemics, but those pandemics are things that are locally controlled. It might be a cholera outbreak from a well in one city. It might be Ebola or SARS in one country or 2 countries or something like that. The difference here is that because we have international connections today, because a lot of the countries that are impacted by this are stage 5 countries, like the US today, like Japan, who has at first was doing really well, now they're not doing so hot, are impacted by this. So stage 2 countries are pandemics. Okay, now remember, stage 3 and 4 countries are essentially the same. Okay, they're dying from what we call degenerative diseases. So this is things like cancer, this is things like heart disease. Okay, if I can write on the bottom of the page here. Okay, cancer, heart disease, things like that. Those are both going to be in 3 and 4. The difference is, in stage 3, we really can't care for those diseases as well. Think back to where America was 60 years ago with cancer and heart disease. Okay, there wasn't a whole lot that you could do with those diseases. Today, there are. Okay, it doesn't mean that people still don't die from them, because they do, but there's a lot more things that we can do today to prolong life. In some cases, to put cancer into remission. My dad has an artificial heart valve. That's something that 60 years ago that wouldn't have happened. So things like that are ways in which we can prolong life based upon medical advancements that we have. So stage 3 countries, stage 4 countries, those are things that are very similar to each other in terms of diseases. Now, stage 5, okay, if you remember, this is very sad in terms of looking at where we are today and what we talked about at the beginning of the year, and you can kind of see how these things are all starting to come true here. We talked about infectious diseases, and we talked about 3 different reasons why infectious diseases were so prominent in stage 5. The first was evolution. Drugs have been out there for a long time. Okay, and diseases oftentimes will evolve and will establish some sort of resistance to drugs. It also takes us a while to develop drugs. Okay, the vaccine for COVID-19 is something that we are working on, but we don't have it right now. Okay, it's going to take a little while for us to get that. So diseases evolve. This isn't a standard flu. This isn't a standard coronavirus. There have been coronaviruses before, not this strain. So it's something that we weren't super prepared for. What made it worse was increased connections. Okay, you go back 500 years ago, a disease that started in China would have never come to the United States, or it would have taken decades for that disease to get to the United States and to spread. Okay, today, one person gets on a plane, and that plane flies into a major hub, and then people from that hub scatter all over the world, and all of a sudden, that disease is everywhere. And we're seeing that exact thing right now, what we talked about at the beginning of the year, with some of our stage 5 countries. People are more connected today with globalization than they have ever been. And because of that, diseases like the coronavirus spread much, much easier than when everybody was isolated from each other. Hey, it is very, very common. If you look at Ohio now, if you look at the counties that don't have a lot of cases, there's one county that has no reported cases right now. Now, I guarantee you there's coronavirus in that county. They just haven't tested a lot. But it's some of these rural counties that are out there where people don't interact as much with other people. Obviously, if you live in one of the big cities or one of the big counties, so Franklin County with Columbus, or Cuyahoga with Cleveland, Hamilton with Cincinnati, you're going to be coming into contact with more people, and you're probably going to be traveling more for work or for school or for whatever the reason is than somebody who might live in a rural area. So increased connections significantly impact the spread of disease. Okay, and the third is poverty. Hey, if you look at infectious diseases and the impact that they're having today on lower income people, okay, if you look at the disproportionate impact of the coronavirus on lower income people, it oftentimes has to do with the fact that they have pre-existing conditions. Maybe they couldn't afford to get different healthcare services earlier in their life. Okay, so when you have people who are at higher risk, they're going to be much more likely to be impacted by these things than people who are in good health. And this is why we're seeing younger people who are healthy, not really seeing the impacts of this the way other people are seeing it in certain areas. So this is something that obviously they wrote this test before this outbreak started, but this fits perfectly into exactly what we've been talking about. So seeing something about the demographic transition model on this test would not surprise me at all. Okay, now let's finish up here. Let's go back to our basic shapes of our population pyramids, and then we'll be finished here. Obviously, stage 1 countries don't exist anymore, but if they did, okay, the population pyramid in a stage 1 country would be our Christmas tree, okay, really high. That's not a Christmas tree. I'm an idiot. Okay, that's tough. Okay, the Christmas tree looks like this and not like that. Okay, there's a Christmas tree. Christmas tree, really broad at the bottom, okay? A lot of young people, not a lot of old people. People are dying before they get to old age. So we have a Christmas tree-shaped population pyramid in stage 1. Okay, that's essentially what we see in stage 2 as well. So today, stage 2 countries, we've got that Christmas tree-shaped population pyramid. Now, in stage 3, we start to see more people starting to live longer. People are starting to have fewer kids. And in stage 3, okay, we start to see this triangle start to morph into more of a box. Okay, so we start to see this box-shaped population pyramid, lower infant mortality rates, slower population growth, longer life expectancy. That's kind of emblematic of a stage 3 country. Then we get to stage 4, and in stage 4 countries, we have a really large working class population. So people are obviously living longer, but what that means is that our population pyramid is going to go to higher ages. So instead of ending in the 60s and 70s like you would see in a stage 2 country, now we see people living into their 90s and 100s in some cases. So your population pyramid is going to go to higher ages. So what you see is a lot of people in the middle, okay, and not a lot of people at the bottom or at the top. You have that boomer population like we have in the United States, and some of these large populations that are kind of there in the middle, and then we have smaller groups at the very top and smaller groups at the very bottom. And then when we get to stage 5, we have the cup. Okay, and this is where we have a lot of older people, but not a lot of younger people. This is where Japan is today with no immigration. Okay, people are dying off. People aren't having as many kids. So as people age, they're not replacing them at the frequency that they were replacing them before. And when you have a country that doesn't allow immigration, you start to see that. Now, look, I told you at the beginning of the year, the United States was right on the border of stage 5. And what would keep us from getting to stage 5 and advancing significantly into stage 5 is immigration. And you may have noticed 2 days ago, President Trump, for at least temporarily, banned immigration into the United States. Okay, so where is the United States today? Right there. Okay, so we're there, Japan's there, Denmark's there, some of our European countries are there, and what are we seeing in terms of our, now granted, the change to the immigration status didn't cause this to come here, didn't cause this, but it's the connectedness that caused this disease to come here. I'm not saying that in any way, shape, or form. But when you see a lot of countries advancing into stage 5, we see a lot of countries that are more interconnected today, fewer people having kids, a lot more older people. A lot of older people are more susceptible to this than younger people. This is why you see the death rates that you're seeing with this. Okay, so this is kind of just a rehash of some of these concepts. I know there's a lot of garbage on the screen right now. Please make sure that you go out to the Google form today. Give me your textbook number for AP Geography. If you're an econ, give me your textbook number for econ as well. And then please let me know which of the units you want me to focus on for the AP review. So I'm going to be starting with some new review videos on Monday. I've also watched quite a few of the videos that are already out there for out on the College Board site, so I'll make sure to let you know which one of those are the best for you to watch, so you can kind of prioritize what you want to do there. But please let me know what is going to help you the most. Today's the 24th of April when you're going to be watching this, so basically you're going to have about 2 weeks and 2 days until your AP test. So we've got some time. So I want to make sure that we get through things that that you need to help you get this. So please go out to that Google form, book number, and what you think you need the most help with, what do you want to review, and I'll have those ready for you starting on Monday. Hope you all have a great weekend. I'll see if you stop by for the Google Meet. I'll see some of you at 10 a.m. Otherwise, check out the video that I'll have ready for you on Monday. Have a good weekend.